Hello,
Mm.
hatchlings. I decided to read some scary stories, even though it's not really Halloween. While I'm recording this, it's only been, what, like 3, 4 days off of Halloween. So, we're just gonna do this anyway. So I've got here a story a day at Fasilias, and we're just gonna go into it. One day in 1901, two women named Anne and Eleanor traveled to France. They wanted to see the place at Versailles. The place was Queen Marie Antoinette's home in the late 1700s. Anne and Eleanor toured the place. Then they went outside to the gardens. They wanted to find Marie Antoinette's smaller home, a villa. The women searched for the little villa. Along the way, they saw a deserted farmhouse. They noticed an old plough on the side of the road. A deep sense of sadness and gloom instantly fell over both women. They felt as if something terrible was about to happen. Soon the two women discovered they were lost. They did not know where to go until they met two men. The men were dressed in long green coats. They wore 3 cornered hats. The women realized that the men's clothes and hats were odd too. They were the kinds of clothes soldiers wore during the French Revolution. "Which way to the villa?" Anne asked the men. The men pointed down a path. "Follow that path," they said. It was not long before they found a beautiful gazebo. On a more normal day, the gazebo would have been lovely, yet this did not seem like a normal day. The countryside looked eerie. Anne and Eleanor felt even sadder than before. The trees were still, the birds were silent. Now the woman had stronger feelings of gloom. Something terrible would surely happen soon. But what? Anne and Eleanor decided to keep going. If they could find the villa, maybe they would feel better. Suddenly a man rushed up from behind them. He had a peculiar smile. His face was scared. The man stared at Anne and Eleanor. Finally he said, "You're going the wrong way." The man pointed to a small bridge. He told the woman to go across it. Anne and Eleanor turned and started across the bridge. When they looked back, the strange man was gone. Anne and Eleanor got to the other side of the bridge. Soon they came to an area they felt must be the villa. Everything was still strangely flat. The countryside looked like something in a bad dream. Anne noticed a beautiful lady. The lady was sketching the countryside. She wore an old-fashioned dress and a pale yellow scarf around her neck. She looked very sad. Anne shivered. She looked at this beautiful lady. There was something familiar there. But who could she be? Both Anne and Eleanor's feelings of sadness and gloom grew stronger and stronger, but they could not explain what made them feel so sad. Anne and Eleanor turned to see a man rush out of a nearby building. He slammed the door, then he glanced at Anne and Eleanor. "The entrance to the villa is on the other side of the building," he said. Anne and Eleanor walked around the other side of the villa. When they got there, they found a small wedding party waiting to tour all the rooms of the villa. Anne and Eleanor's gloomy mood magically lifted. A soft breeze blew the leaves of the trees. Anne and Eleanor continued their tour of the villa. Everything seemed normal again. Nothing else unusual happened that day. But the two women did not understand the strange sights they had seen. The next year, Anne returned to the French palace. She searched for the villa again, but everything looked different. "Where's the plough?" Anne asked. "The bridge is gone too." Anne told a gardener about the men in green coats and the man with a scared face. Then she described the ladies sketching and the man who had rushed out of the villa. The gardener explained that no ploughs had been kept in the palace gardens, but an old plough had been displayed on the grounds in 1789. No bridge was on the grounds either, but a bridge had been there in 1789. The men in green coats were a part of Marie Antoinette's Swiss Guard. The man with the scared face sounded like an enemy of Marie Antoinette. The gardener turned to the door that Anne had seen a man rush out of last year. The door was bolted shut. "It's been bolted shut for many years," said the gardener. "I know who the lady was," said Anne. "She was Marie Antoinette." Anne knew she had stumbled into Marie Antoinette's own sad memory. It was her memory in the day of 1789. She had just learned that an angry mob from Paris was marching toward the palace gates to get her. Dun dun dun. And that was the end of the scary story. I'm going to try and find another one so that we can continue this parade of scary stories. The next one is called Sweet Mary. Holmesville was a nice place, at least that is what the people who lived there said. The people who grew up there liked it so much they nearly always chose to stay there to raise their own children. Holmesville had all the comforts of a big city, but people always knew their neighbors. When you walked down the street, someone would always smile and ask how you were doing. Jack was one of the Holmesville citizens. Everyone in Holmesville knew him and everyone liked him. Jack had a lot of friends. Jack would spend most of his time playing football, basketball, or baseball with his friends, but he did not have a friend that he could just talk to. That's when he met Mary. It happened quite by accident. Jack was sitting in his car in front of the library, daydreaming as usual. He spotted a girl sitting on the bench by the bus stop across the street. She was wearing a party dress and looked like she had been waiting there for quite a long time. "That's the prettiest girl I've ever seen," Jack said. Jack wanted to introduce himself, but girls always made him nervous. He never seemed to say any of the right things. Finally, he gathered his courage. Jack reached the bench and sat down. The girl kept staring straight ahead. Jack could feel his heart pumping in his chest. "Hello," he said shyly. The girl did not answer. "My name is Jack," he continued. Then Jack lightly brushed the girl's shoulder. Suddenly she came to life. She turned to look at Jack. She could not see a touch of fear in his eyes. "Hello," she said softly. "My name is Mary." Jack saw that Mary was shivering in the cool autumn air, so he gave her his leather jacket. They sat on the bench for a long time. Jack did all the talking. Mary just smiled and offered a few kind words. The hour grew very late. Jack drove Mary home. When Jack stopped in front of her house, Mary leaned over and gave him a quick peck on the cheek. Jack watched Mary walk to the front of the door before Mary went into the house. She turned, looked at Jack and smiled. It was the sweetest smile Jack had ever seen. This is also something that would not happen in real life. The next morning, Jack picked a small bouquet of flowers and went to Mary's house. A small old woman answered his knock. When Jack asked if he could see Mary, the old woman looked startled. "Mary?" she asked. The old woman looked at Jack carefully. Finally she said, "Please come in." The old woman pointed to a picture on the mantel. "Is this the girl you spoke with last night?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. "I am Mrs. Sweet, Mary's mother," she said. "Mary died almost 20 years ago." Jack did not believe what he was hearing. "Everybody liked Mary," said Mrs. Sweet. She'd meet someone for the first time and talk to them like she'd known them forever. This house was always full of friends laughing till all hours. Mrs. Sweet paused. "You're not the first person to tell me that you've seen her. I like to think that she's close." Jack was shocked. "It's true, Jack," said Mrs. Sweet. She paused and wiped away a tear. "Mary is buried in Holmesville Cemetery." Jack left Mary's house and ran until he reached the cemetery, where he saw the leather jacket that he had given Mary hanging on a tombstone. He stopped short. Then he saw what was written on her tombstone: "Mary Sweet, January 14, 1942,
to May 5th, 1958. Jack placed the flowers on Mary's grave. He did not know that Mary's ghost was perched on top of the tombstone, watching him closely. "I couldn't have imagined you," Jack said. "My jacket is right here." Jack reached for the jacket and held it close to him. He noticed that it smelled faintly of perfume. "You did wear this," he exclaimed. "You were at the bus stop." Jack began to pace. He was trying so hard to put this puzzle together. "There were so many things that I wanted to talk to you about," Jack said. Then Mary walked over to Jack and said, "Don't be sad. I'm right here." Jack could not hear her, but goosebumps rose on his arm at that moment. She whispered in his ear. He could not know that Mary, the sweetest girl he'd ever met, had come to say goodbye. Ta-da! And that was a story of a sim falling in love with a ghost, because that's what happens in The Sims when you play it. Oh yay, we have one that actually says a ghost story. This one should be interesting. "I unlocked the door and stepped into my new apartment. I had worked hard all day. I was tired. All I wanted to do was settle before a cozy fire, read the evening newspaper, then crawl into bed. I stoked the fire in the fireplace and eased into my favorite chair. In the newspaper I saw a story about the Cardiff Giant. Stone Man has a plaster twin. Crowds of people have been lining up to see New York City own Petrified Man. At the 18th Street exhibit hall, they believe they are paying to see the stone giant that was discovered in the farm in Cardiff, New York. They don't know that the giant on display at the exhibit hall is merely a plaster cast of the Cardiff Giant. Earlier this year, a Cardiff farmer was digging on his farm when he found a stone figure of a man. The stone man was over 10 feet tall. Many people believe that the ancient tribe of giants lived in New York thousands of years ago. They believe the farmer in Cardiff discovered the fossilized remains of one of these giant men. Scientists are now studying the Cardiff Giant. Many experts doubt the figure is a petrified giant. They believe it is a statue carved from stone. I laughed. Some people will believe just about anything. In Cardiff, they were paying to see a stone man that is probably a fake. In New York City, they are flocking to see a plaster imitation of the fake. At least now, though, I knew why the streets outside had been so crowded. I lived across from the 18th Street exhibit hall. Climbed into bed. I was glad I had a scientific mind. I demanded proof when I heard far-fetched stories. I closed my eyes and drifted off to sleep when I heard footsteps in the hallway. These were not just any footsteps, they sounded like boulders being dropped on the floor. With each step, the whole building shook. After each step, I heard a clank. Like somebody was dragging a chain. Oh no, it's the Silent Hill pyramid head dude. Thump, clank, thump, clank. I pulled my blanket over my head. I pressed it against my ears. It muffled the thumping and clanking, but I could still feel the building shake. Honestly, if I was in a situation like that in real life, I would just run. The shaking seemed to come closer. My blanket slipped off my shoulders. I tugged on it. Something, or someone, tugged harder. I pulled the blanket from my face. A huge man loomed over me. I screamed. The man screamed. I stared up at the man. His head was the size of my duffel bag. His chest was as big as a barrel. His arms hung down at his sides like tree trunks. I could see right through him. Through his head I could see the ceiling. Through his enormous belly I could see the fire still crackling in the fireplace. You're a ghost," I whispered. "I am a spirit, it is true," his voice boomed. "A spirit who cannot rest." His massive shoulders sagged. He looked so sad and lost. I forgot to be afraid of him. I scrambled from my bed. The poor giant shivered. "You must be cold," I said. "Come sit by the fire." He stomped over to the fireplace and heaved his ghostly body into my favorite chair. Crack! The chair shattered beneath him. The giant stood up and looked down the sticks of wood scattered around him. "I am sorry, I shouldn't have tried to sit on something so small." He lumbered over to my bed and lowered himself down onto it. The metal bed frame was squashed into the floor. "Stop that," I said. "You'll crush every piece of furniture I own." The ghost struggled up from my flattened bed. "I'm sorry, I'm just so tired. I haven't had a chance to sit down for a very long time." "Here," I said, "sit on this." I pulled the rug in front of the fire. "Thank you," he said. The giant sat on the rug. I wrapped a blanket around his shoulders. I turned my washtub over and set it on his head to keep his ears warm. Wait, what? You put your bath on his head? Alright then. Now I said, "Tell me why you're haunting my apartment." The ghost sighed. "I didn't want to hurt you. I'm only trying to get some rest. My body is lying across the street. It's on display for crowds of people. I'm so tired I want to go back to sleep, but I won't be able to until they bury my body again." "You're the Cardiff Giant?" I said. "The what?" asked the ghost. I retrieved the newspaper and spread it open to the story about the giant. "Listen to this," I said. I began to read the story. I skipped over the part about the scientist who did not believe the stone man was real. I did not want to hurt the ghost's feelings. His eyes grew wide as I read about the plaster imitation. The ghost stared at me. "The stone man across the street isn't me?" I shook my head. "He isn't even stone. He is plaster." The sad ghost buried his face in his hands. "You mean I've been haunting this street for nothing?" "Don't worry," I said. I reached out to his shoulder. "Go to Cardiff. That's where your stone body is." The ghost rose to his feet. "I better get started." He lumbered across my apartment and walked out the door. His footsteps thundered across the hall and down the stairs. I glanced at the newspaper. The expert thought the stone man was a fake. I knew he was real, but the experts would never believe me. They would not believe my far-fetched story about talking to a ghost unless I gave them proof. But I did not have proof. I smiled. I was glad I did not have proof. If the world believed the stone man was a fake, they would leave him alone. Then the giant spirit would be able to rest. I heard the ghost stomp out into the street. I watched the poor ghost of the Cardiff Giant trudge away down the street. Then the ghost turned the corner and disappeared into the darkness. Alright, that was the end of that one, and I'll read another ghost story. I feel like we got time for like one more or so. This one is called Haunted Cemeteries. Let's jump in. Ghosts and spirits have been seen in many places, but a cemetery is one of the most common places to see a ghost. Bachelor's Grove Cemetery is near Chicago. It is called the most haunted place in Illinois. Over the years, a lot of strange things have happened at Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. Many people have seen the white misty shape of a woman holding a baby. Others have seen a disappearing house at the cemetery. An eerie light comes from one of the windows, then the whole house disappears. But the strangest report was about a ghost car. A couple was driving through the cemetery. Suddenly, they saw an old car coming straight towards them. The couple knew they could not swerve out of the way in time, so the man and woman closed their eyes. They expected to crash into the other car. They heard screeching brakes, a loud crash, and broken glass. but when they opened their eyes, they realized they were not her. They looked around, the old car was nowhere to be found. They got out to inspect their own car. It did not have a scratch on it. Another cemetery where there are almost just as many ghosts as graves in Woodland Cemetery in Dayton, Ohio. One dark night, 2 college boys were walking home. It was late, so they decided to take a shortcut. They climbed the tall gate to cut through the cemetery. The boys saw a woman crying on the steps in front of a stone tomb. "Do you need help?" asked one boy. As they got closer, the boys noticed they could see right through the weeping woman. "Are you okay?" asked the other boy. The ghostly shape looked up at the boys. She had very sad eyes. She stood up quickly and started to float backwards. She drifted up the steps, passed through the tomb's heavy stone doors, and disappeared. The boys looked at each other. "Let's get out of here," they shouted as they ran away. When the 2 students told the cemetery's groundskeeper what they had seen, he nodded. He had heard the story many times before. "Well," the groundskeeper said, "you're not the first people to meet the weeping woman of Woodland." Ghost sightings at cemeteries usually happen at night. Many ghost experts believe this is when ghosts roam. They say that many spirits cannot find rest in the afterlife. They are cursed to wander all day and night. For this reason, ghosts are sure to be awake when everyone else is asleep. One famous ghost in Columbus, Ohio, wanders at night. She makes so much noise she wakes up the neighbors. People who live near Camp Chase Cemetery wake up to hear loud cries in the middle of the night. The sad ghost is known as the Lady in Grey. Neighbors who have seen her say she is dressed in a grey suit from the 1860s. They say the Lady in Grey is full of sorrow because her husband died in the Civil War. Some believe she is the wife of Benjamin Allen, a soldier who died at Camp Chase during the Civil War. His tombstone is still there today. Many people have seen the Lady in Grey. One neighbor heard her cry out, "I miss you, Benjamin. Oh no." The neighbor thought the cries were a loud prank. He went to the cemetery to investigate, but he did not see the Lady in Grey, or anyone else for that matter. But there were footprints in the snow. Then he found 2 red roses left in front of Benjamin Allen's tombstone. It was a bit of an anticlimactic ending. But we'll move along to another story. I'm just on this whole entire website thing, just kind of looking at all of the ghost stories. I'll just kind of mention that at the end though. This one's called The Open Window, and we're gonna read it. Vera smiles at Mr. Nuttall. "My aunt will join us soon," says Vera. "Until then you must try and put up with me. May I take your hat and coat?" Mr. Nuttall is a nervous man. He shyly smiles back at Vera. "Thank you," says, gives her his hat and coat. Mr. Nuttall nervously looks around the drawing room. He looks at all the pictures on the walls and the couch. He looks at the open window. He looks at the green lawn just beyond the open window. Vera closely watches Mr. Nuttall. "You just moved to the country?" she asked. "Yes," says Mr. Nuttall. Fidgets with his hands, his eyes twitches. I moved here to benefit from country life. Country life is relaxing and slow. Do you know anyone in the country? Asked Vera. Not a soul, said Mr. Nuttall. Your Aunt Mrs. Sappleton is my first new friend. Mr. Nuttall takes a deep breath. His body shivers. My sister Olivia lived in the country 4 years ago. Olivia met your aunt at that time. Olivia says your aunt is very nice. So you don't know anything about my aunt? Asked Vera. I only know her name and address, said Mr. Nuttall. Is she nice? He asked with a gulp. Oh yes, very nice indeed, said Vera. She is nice despite the tragedy. Tragedy? What do you mean? Asked Mr. Nuttall. He fidgets with his hands, his eyes twitches, his body shivers. The tragedy happened about 3 years ago, since your sister was here, says Vera. Vera looked directly into Mr. Nuttall's eyes. You may wonder why this window is open, she says. I had noticed it, says Mr. Nuttall. The view is very pretty. Pretty and tragic, says Vera. 3 years ago today, my aunt's husband, 2 brothers, and their favourite dog left through that window on a hunting trip. They never returned. They had gone hunting in the moors. When they crossed a moor, they fell into a deep bog and were never seen again. Mr. Nuttall's eyes widened with fear. On their anniversary of their deaths, said Vera, my poor aunt leaves the window open. She believes that they will return, and, you know, Mr. Nuttall, on such a lovely day as this, I sometimes think they will. Vera's aunt walks into the room. Mr. Nuttall, she says, I'm sorry to keep you waiting. I hope my niece has made you comfortable. Yes, says Mr. Nuttall, his eyes looking quickly from Mrs. Sappleton to Vera to the window. I do hope you don't mind the open window, says Mrs. Sappleton. My husband and brothers are hunting on the moors. They should return soon. They always come back through the store. I do hate how they track mud onto my carpets. Those moors are so muddy, you know. Mr. Nuttall listens with horror. He fidgets with his hands, his eyes twitches, his body shivers. Vera watches Mr. Nuttall. I see, says Mr. Nuttall, anxious to change the subject. I am pleased to meet you. I will be in the country for a few months. I moved to the country for the benefit of my nerves. My doctor says I absolutely must relax. Country life is relaxing and slow, don't you think? Mrs. Sappleton turns from the open window. She looks at her guest. Yes, it is, Mr. Nuttall, she answers, and the hunting in this country is very good too. Mrs. Sappleton turns back to the open window. I wonder how the hunting is today, she asks. The drawing room is silent. Mr. Nuttall nervously tries to fill the silence. My sister Olivia met you about 4 years ago, he says. Olivia said the country would be very good for my nerves. Look, here they are, says Mrs. Sappleton, and they're back just in time for tea. The elder woman walks towards the open window. She looks out across the green lawn. Goodness, look at all that mud. They will surely ruin all my carpets today. Mr. Nuttall cannot believe his eyes and ears. What a tragic situation. This poor Mrs. Sappleton needs more help than he does. Mr. Nuttall turned to Vera to show sympathy, but the child is staring out the window. Vera's eyes are wide with horror. Mr. Nuttall fidgets with his hands, his eye twitches, his body shivers. He turns to look out the window. Far across the green lawn, a dog runs towards the drawing room. Following the dog is an older man with a shotgun resting on his shoulder and 2 young boys carrying sacks. Their boots are covered in mud. Mr. Nuttall screams, "Ah!" Mr. Nuttall grabs his coat and hat without turning back. He runs from the drawing room and out the open window.
He runs across the lawn and disappears from sight. In his hasty exit, he almost knocks over the returning Mr. Sappleton. "What got into that young man?" asked Mr. Sappleton. He steps on the clean carpet with his muddy boots. Mrs. Sappleton shakes her head and looks at the mud. "Such an odd, nervous fellow," Mrs. Sappleton tells Mr. Sappleton. He fidgeted with his hands, his eyes twitched, his body shivered. He talked all about his nervous condition. Then he left without saying goodbye. Very peculiar. "He was probably frightened by the dog," says Vera. She bends to scratch the dog's head. "Makes sense, really," Vera continues. "He told me that he was very scared of dogs. Several years ago, he was hiking in the mountains while following a dark and narrow trail. He stumbled upon a pack of wild dogs. The dogs chased the poor fellow for 3 days. Mr. Nuttall finally climbed up a tree and hid in the branches below him. The dogs walked back and forth, snarling and barking, for a whole week." Vera sweetly smiles at her aunt and uncle. Vera likes to tell stories. Well, that was definitely a rather mean story. I wouldn't really say it's a scary story, I just more say it's a mean one. A poor, like, kinda just, like, bullying this poor man who obviously has a condition. Like, I know you're a kid, but, like, seriously? I was going to read another story, but then I ended up looking at how much video I kind of have left for this whole entire thing, and it's not really all that much video that I have left, which is perfectly fine, but some of the short stories aren't really short enough to do the rest of the video. But I am curious to see what you did think of this video, because it's one of those strange things where you tell a scary story, but I've been playing one of the Minecraft minigames in the background. This is one of the glide minigames, and I just kind of went online and I was like, I wonder if I can just kind of first some people and just kind of fly around and see how well I do on the maps. I haven't really flown a lot of them, so as you can see I'm struggling quite a bit with it, which is fine. Like, you know, it's just something I haven't played before, but I have seen online. There are a few Minecraft YouTubers that I kind of watch, and I noticed that Stampy, you probably know him, was playing the Minecraft minigames, and that's kind of how I found out about all of these, and I was like, oh my goodness, this would be absolutely wonderful to do videos on. And then my fiance gave me the great idea to do storytelling while I play Minecraft, and I was like, well, what if I do storytelling while I'm playing a lot of like the Minecraft minigames, because they're quite, you know, like short and everything, and just kind of a nice background visual to everything, I think. And then I thought, because Halloween has been, I could do something kind of spooky. I know it's all leading up to Christmas now, maybe a bit too early to be thinking about Christmas, but pretty much as soon as Halloween ends, everybody's talking about Christmas and everything, so I guess it's not too early, because I guess literally the day after Halloween, all of a sudden it's Christmas, and here in Australia, Halloween isn't really seen that much as a holiday. So along with like all the Halloween props and stuff, there was already like Christmas stuff being hung out. So I
I might just be coming in a bit late to the Christmas party, as I want to do some more kind of Halloween and spooky stuff, just because it's fun. Why not kind of celebrate the holiday a little bit longer? Like, why not? You know? I don't know, it's fun to kind of do some more easier going videos where, like, obviously if I'm reading a story it's kind of hard, in the sense that if I get a bit too into it, I can tend to lose my voice, or at least wear it out a little bit. So I gotta be careful in that sense, but I think we're okay. I just gotta be careful, I guess. I'm debating just ending it here and then just having a small section where I'm just flying through the map, but there's not really kind of any commentary or anything. Don't really know how well that will go. I think having a shorter segment than the one that I'm looking at right now is probably a bit better. But I've not been doing too bad with the glide minigame maps, just getting a little bit better at things. I will apologize while I am here about the issues with my internet and stuff, and having to like break up a lot of videos on my phone. When I'm uploading from my phone uploads, I'm having to break them down quite a lot, so I do apologize about the videos having like 6 separate parts on them. I just had no other way to kind of really get it up there in that quality, but I'll take a different approach to it, I think, to get there. Anyway, this was pretty fun. If you enjoyed it, waddle over to the like button and slap the subscribe to become a hatchling, and I'll see you all in a wingspan. Bye! Bye 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 bye!